Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. This is Dr. Daniel Roberts, President and CEO of Moral Injury Support Network for Servicewomen Incorporated. Welcome to the Moral Injury Support Network podcast. Today, we feature a special guest, Dr. Deborah Howell. She is a seasoned trauma sensitive health and wellness professional who combines decades of experience as a physical therapist, life and health coach, and wellness educator, utilizing evidence based, trauma informed and mindfulness practices to support individuals and organizations in navigating the challenges of vicarious trauma, moral injury, grief, loss, and the complexities of change. As a health professional and military veteran, Dr. Howell brings a unique understanding of the mental, emotional, and physical toll that trauma, loss, and adversity can have on healthcare professionals, first responders, veterans, and crisis professionals. She integrates scientifically backed techniques with spiritual practices aimed at fostering self awareness and emotional resilience through the lens of heart intelligence and shares tools that further help you understand your body's responses and sustain emotional resilience. Dr. Howell is a servant leader who's deeply committed to supporting her colleagues and comrades and frontline responders who dedicate their lives to serving our most vulnerable. She is ready to support you to feel empowered and embrace and reclaim your sense of agency, purpose, and well being. Welcome to the podcast, Dr. Howell.
Thank you, Dr. Roberts. I'm really happy to be here.
Okay, how are you? How are things going in your profession right now? There's a lot of um, concern, new administration in the White House, a lot of changes in the VA and other places. So how is your ministry, your work going given the current kind of environment?
Well, strictly speaking, in the hospital, things are kind of the same, but there's another aspect to my work dealing with Medicaid, and so there's a pending. It's sort of a holding status for head injury program that I'm a part of right now.
Mm.
And so that infrastructure has been in process of going through some change. And there was already delay before this. And now there's another few question marks. So um yeah, so it's kind of a split thing, right? Some parts of it is still sort of where it's at, and the
Mhm.
other part it has a wider unknown. And, you know, for me personally, it's to take each day as it unfolds and do my best not to anticipate
Right.
the worst or, you know, kind of work myself into a what if situation. Um,
Right.
you know, more self-care.
Yeah, so one of the things I think is really neat that I want to get into with you is your coaching program and your approach to trauma. So that the good news is, regardless of what happens within our healthcare systems or our VA system, et cetera, um, a lot of, like I said, a lot of unknowns. There, you have a program that you can take people through that is a path to healing and wholeness. Can you tell us a little bit about that program?
Yeah, it's really is to speak about what we don't readily come forth with, right? And that's how we feel about ourselves, right? This aspect of um w- well, we're talking about moral injury, or we're talking about dealing with trauma, you know, um, beliefs we hold true that may be skewed, right, based on a variety of conditioned beliefs, right, and experiences, and that get reinforced. But the idea is that people are hurting, they're scared, and they don't want to be labeled. and they're in professions, right? And living their life to serve and to care for other people who are vulnerable, right? And yet their own vulnerability cannot be addressed because of a fear of, this being stigmatized, or again, being labeled, or losing employment, you know, um, and just not feeling that they'd be understood, right? And so this approach that I have is taking everything that I've learned over the last 3 decades and integrating it into a holistic approach to addressing what we bury deeply, right? That we silence ourselves to speak about, but yet the body may speak about it with other disturbances, right? Like sleep, blood
Mhm.
pressure issues, irritability, things like that, or
Right.
even performance. So, yeah.
So would you say in your work, it seems like probably a lot of people, um, most people, if not all people, are walking around with some level of trauma that's pretty buried, that's maybe affecting them in ways they don't realize, right?
Correct. And sometimes we don't call it trauma, right? We might not even call it trauma. So the vicarious nature of our humanness is that we actually pick up things in our environment. And so if there's something that we witness that is um, unpleasant, or just wrong, or terrifying, right? Or sad, like we pick that up vicariously. We don't necessarily have to have a direct involvement. Like there's an accident, for instance, right? And then there's injury. That impact can be effect can take effect in our body, right? Can influence our health,
Mm.
our physiology in that moment where our fight or flight system, our survival system, instinctively, we don't think about it. It's right there, right? To constrict, to affect how we're breathing, right? We actually stop breathing. We could be holding our breath, right? We're in a micro state of like shock.
Mm.
And some of this can replay itself. If it's affecting our sleep, then we can't sleep, right? We're worried, we're concerned. And then there's direct nature of trauma, right? If someone has gone through something personal, an experience that directly affects the physical body, right? The emotional body, right? With abuse, with just, in the lines of, especially looking at veterans, right? If in the lines of combat, or in the lines of, right, seeing a fellow um, service member injured, or if they feel like they couldn't help them, those kind of things that live in the body over time. So, trauma, there's micro trauma, there's little bits where we don't necessarily think is trauma. Even watching the television, right? We need to be mindful of our how we take on information, take in information literally into the body. And then what
Right.
stories and narratives and beliefs get um, formulated and replayed. Yeah.
So what is the main goal of the program that we're talking about? The re
So the goal is whatever the individual is, right? So I think the first part to anyone participating is, number one, the desire for something different than what they have, mainly how they feel about themselves, how they feel about what's going on in their life. It could be a health condition, right? It can be they're not able to focus, you know, or they just don't feel like this is who I am, and they can't shake it. So everyone has their own um desires for what they want in this life. So it's not a cookie cutter thing. It's certainly
Yeah.
take each person and have a conversation. And the conversation honestly is with oneself, right? So how do we do that? How do we have an honest conversation with ourselves to allow ourselves to be vulnerable to our most deepest, most vulnerable place and sensitivity, right?
Yeah.
When and there's no construct around that. So
So when we're in a sense, it sounds like we're reconnecting with maybe some part of ourself that may have been I don't want to say broken off, but like because of the trauma and so on, it's like walled off from like that inner strength that we might have or inner genius, inner capability that that's there, but we're kind of like now we're maybe separated from it or it's there's a like a trauma barrier between our conscious and that deeper strength. Does that make sense? Is that
yeah, absolutely. So there's a few ways to look at that, at just what you're saying. There can be like a walling off, right?
Mm,
We can wall off to give some um sort of space or disconnect in that sense, right? There can also be a suppression, right? Where we just push it down, pack it away. We can even like package it up nicely with a bow and put it someplace,
yeah,
leave it there, right, for some other day, some other time. And but yeah, there can be a gap in to disconnect. And so that's built into the system for us to survive, right? To do what we do. You know, we have I've spoken to firefighters and and law enforcement, and you can have that part of the day where you're dealing with such a huge contrast in um, a birth situation and a traumatic death situation in the same day. So how are we going to manage our feelings when both of them are very intense and very human, and we still have a job to do, right? So
right.
there's a what do we do in those moments, right? Is that we are on board to do what needs to be done. And so that might call for sort of segmenting away
Mm,
those feelings, right?
right.
Especially the ones that are like grief, right? That kind of thing. Where we could, experience the some of the elation of the birth, but even though it's sort of a moderated kind of way to approach, because we can't go too high and we can't go too low, right? Those
Right.
are extremes, and that's stress in itself. And a matter of fact, just as I say that, I think about when we talk about retirement, right? The same kind of thing, that too much, right, of a change inherently creates stress in the system, So it's important to realize that this kind of work, it's not to go and take this new awareness and then blow it up into no, because that's terrifying. And so we're going to automatically like guard against and push back without trying to do that, because that's more stress upon stress that's already there. But the awareness to all of this is not necessarily conscious. So
Okay. Um, so in your program is called Rebuild Your Identity After Trauma, A Path to Healing and Wholeness. We're going to
mhm.
have an informational meeting about this next week and inviting people who just are curious about the program, how it might be able to help them. And we'll put out the details of that informational meeting a little later on. But as a sort of brief introduction now, can you give us a couple of steps or elements or pieces of the program?
Yeah, the first part of it again is to identify where we are. That's really important is to identify where we are. And then from that point, it's to connect with the body. So there'll be practices to sort of be present to ourselves, learning how to be present to ourselves with practices of that are breath work and somatic work, things that get us into the body. And again, we can't force ourselves into the body. We want to sit with ourselves, right? And so learning different techniques. So there'll be the educational component about understanding and validating our experience, and it is it's a walk through, somewhat talk through, but then feel through program. And ultimately, we want to free ourselves of this constriction, this binding, this weightiness. And there are multiple approaches that I have that I will teach you about. And this truly, the program is an onboarding. It's a six session program. And but we start with identifying where we are and our own willingness to kind of open to new experiences. So we're addressing our own belief systems, right? Any conditioning, our understanding the differences in traumatic exposures, right? Vicarious, direct, what have you. And so it's kind of a hybrid of the didactic, whereas there's, the teaching, the cognitive piece, but then there's also really the physiology to get the body moving and to get the body um, ready for this self-exploration. And it's what I can say is that we invite ourselves, give ourselves permission to feel different. And so there's some of the things that we're going to be consciously ready for. And I can be honest with you though, the thing is we can have an agenda and a framework for all of this. And what will happen is what is ready to happen. And that's really below the conscious level. And I want to put people at ease because this is not forced. We don't force healing upon ourselves. And as a practitioner and as a coach, I'm holding a space for you. And so safety, feeling that felt sense of safety is the invitation to come into a space like that. And it's not in your head. It's not like, okay, here's a safe space for you, and I'm telling you that. You will either feel it and respond appropriately because that's the reality of it. Yeah. And so it's a gentle approach. It's a compassionate approach. And it's a very effective and integrative, holistic approach, this sixth session. And honestly, it really is, it's truly a beginning but it's a beginning that can lead people to really living and being who they truly are and to the potential, right? That given potential of our life. Yeah.
So one of the things you say about this is that it will transform emotional wounds into wisdom.
Mhm.
Can you explain that a little
Yeah.
bit further?
Yeah, wounds are an interesting because we create scabs over wounds, right? So if you think of a wound that you can see, when a wound starts to heal, it scabs, right? So when we have wounds internally, we cover them up, right? We cover them up, we mask over what we feel. And but there's information that we can garner from it. There's lessons, there's an experience, there's an appreciation that we can gain from the wound. And coming back to a place of this, the lens of the body is sacred, our life is sacred, honoring who we are, right? Because we are so good at criticizing
Right.
ourselves.
Right.
And this is another place where we can come and be with ourselves. And so those wounds, our life experience that are still sort of not healed over yet, they can be healed. And and in that space that we can um find peace, right? Because oftentimes there's not that peace, right? And
Right.
that peace is not necessarily cognitive, like I don't have peace. It's like the body is like there's a restlessness at times, right, in the body, or a dis-ease, right? They call it. So we
Yeah.
can have illness based on unhealed wounds, but wounds are there for the experience at hand, but yet the wounds can provide us information, you know? Yeah.
Yeah. So, what are some of in terms of your work with first responders, military folks, et cetera? What are some of the really is there a story you can tell about somebody that you really helped in a tremendous way? Without giving any
Mhm.
specifics about that person, but just, kind of a little bit of their background, what you did to help them and how they're doing now, that kind of thing. Um,
Yeah, I have a firefighter in particular that comes to mind, and again, it was the initial wanting to just care more, to care more. And because when I was talking about this moderate way of living life, sort of being just sort of in this place, can't really experience the joy, right? And and yet there's this automatic like suppressing of emotion because of the nature of the work,
right.
right? And then, but then as things start to unfold, now this person I worked with for, 6 months, right? But it started out um, with the desire to feel more in life, to care more. And so to understand that in the profession, and then how it overflowed into their personal life, right? So that work life overflowed into personal life where they still could allow themselves to go either way, right? And I
Yeah.
know this too from, being in the military, is that some of the work we do, especially when we have deployments and we come back, we have to have time to decompress, right? And then we have a partner or a spouse who's like wanting to tell you everything that happened during the week, and there's a like, you know, tuning out because you can't, it's just no, can't do it. And what that sets up for is like you don't care,
Yeah.
right? That and you just left and everything went havoc, right? There are lots of stories like that from military. So this is about our own like ability to connect with ourselves and give ourselves permission because we don't know how to hold that space without feeling like we're going to fall apart. If we start to feel, right? If we go
Yeah.
beyond that little window, right? That that capacity, right? Because this program is to begin to expand our capacity, right? So if we're this much being able to tolerate certain things in life, because this keeps us safe. This keeps us feeling safe, feeling in control. But if we step outside this space to go too low, where we can't get up anymore, or too high, where we're just kind of like, you know, and that high could be in, we can have high joy or high anger, right? So there's volatility, there's these other aspects of when there's a heightened, right, um, state of excitement, right? Excitement from an aggressive point, or I say aggressive, but more if there's anger,
Like
frustration, right?
rage and like,
Yes, you got it. Yes, yes. Yeah. So these are the things that, yeah, we want to moderate, but we also want to be able to know how we can enter space and have some tools, right? That help us ground, that help us sort of stay present with ourselves. Because a natural thing about the human body is survival. We don't have to think about what we need to do to survive. When, the body alerts us to danger immediately, right? Don't get your hand off the burner. It's hot too. Like you don't have to think, oh, my fingers are getting hot. Like I should probably take. No, it's an instinct. It's hot. Get off. That's
right,
part of our instinctive thing. Well, what happens when we have emotional, right? That we will guard against and defend, just like what you're talking about. We wall off, right?
mm,
But meanwhile, the pressure's building,
right,
and the pressure can be um, expressed with this outburst also, right? Of emotion that's not modulated or managed in a way that is allowing us to feel safe anymore, because it really is this inner sense of safety, and it's a perceived sense. This brain survival mechanism is in place to keep us safe, to protect us.
right.
And so, you know, the mind tells us lots of stories, and lots of them are not true. And the body is going to reflect, honestly, what's true. So
Yeah.
it's really having that working relationship with ourselves.
Yeah, that's really good. I think part of the problem with being either really low or really high, even if it's really high joy, um, is that we can um, kind of lose sense of what's realistic or what's really happening, or um, so if you're really low, depression, etc., then you lose like this sense of hope, and you can feel like even if you have like an idea about something you could do to make things better, you may likely think, ah, it won't work, or I'm just gonna feel worse or whatever. So you lose even the ability to try without somebody really to help, you know, till till you can get out of that place. If you get really high, you have to sometimes modulate like your ideas. You can get really excited and think, oh, I'm gonna, um, invest or this money in this, and I'm gonna be rich and whatever. Not a good example, but you can, like in business, make poor decisions, or in other things, if because you just have this feeling of like nothing can go wrong, everything, and so having that great high feeling is great, but need to be able to modulate maybe the actions that you do while you're feeling that. Same thing when you're feeling really low. Um, like I remember years ago, a chaplain telling me don't make decisions when you're very emotional. right? And that could be very high or very low. It's just you tend to, if you're very low, tend to, say, for instance, you had some kind of disagreement with your spouse or some kind of, issue that's maybe for a while and it's very emotionally triggering, and you get into that and then you feel really low because um you maybe got into that thing again with her, whatever it was. You may easily think, I need to divorce her, I need to get rid of her, she doesn't love me, all this, none of which could be true, right? You could really just be, maybe that argument or that issue needs to be resolved, but doesn't mean the whole marriage is bad. um if again, like if you're really high, you may make decisions that are not, don't have enough common sense or enough like practicality to them. And so I think it seems to me, a balance of like letting those emotions happen. Because if you do get in a toss up with your wife and or your spouse and you do feel bad about it, it's okay to feel bad about it. Just don't make decisions about it until you get in a better space. Or it's great to feel really good and be optimistic about the future and love it. But, before you make a really significant decision because of the way you're feeling, get some other people to think, people you trust to help you think it through, whatever the case is. So I think there's, um, like a balancing of, but a balancing of like decision making and so on. But at the same time, I do hear what you're saying. I think it's important to allow those feelings to happen, so that you can be true to yourself. You can. It's sort of like if I have a really really important friend who comes to me and is feeling a certain way. I just feel bad about this. I think my wife doesn't love me anymore, or whatever the case is. Da da da. I'm gonna affirm their feelings in a sense that they have the right to feel that way, and I wouldn't shut them down. And say you can't feel that way. You need to love your wife. You need to be happy with her, whatever. I would never do that. I would just simply be there, present with them while they were feeling those feelings. And then, if they decide to make decisions about it, I might say, well, let's think about this and blah blah blah. But I would acknowledge and affirm their feelings no matter what they were, um, because I care about them and I don't want to give the impression or the thought or the idea that something about them isn't good enough, that it's not okay for them to feel a certain way. And so I think kind of it seems like to me that's what you said, being present with yourself, is about accepting the feelings you have, accepting the thoughts you have, and then um, acknowledging that that it's okay for to feel that way, right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Being kind to oneself, being kind, being our own friend, you know. I can tell you that many people struggle with that, right? We're great to be judge and critics, but
Yeah,
be nice and kind. And sometimes that is something that plays out because of early condition,
right.
early
Absolutely.
experiences, right? So we want to take what's still playing out today. We're not going to live in the past. We need to, how does the past show up in the present? And
Right.
everything, all our experiences are, and we're energy. Okay, if we don't get believe we're energy, we're energy. We have these remote controls. You just touch the car and the car door opens, right? We're an electric, okay, and our emotions are energy, right? We can palpate and we can feel. I call it the rotten apple syndrome. Like if you put a rotten apple in a bag of healthy apples, what happens, right? So energetically, we can feel tension in a space, right? We can feel, right? And it has a field. And so we have an electric field, and but internally, our experiences have some charge to it. So the intensity, the breath, the duration all impacts. how it's going to register in the system, right? And so we don't want to like uncap and woof, like a genie, genie in a bottle, like whoosh, all over the place. No, we're not going to do this. But we can begin to release some of this tension and come into some awareness and appreciation and validation of what we feel matters, because it does. And how we show up for ourselves matters. And in that place, because there's this other term called overcare, right? Where we then um, are just giving and expending so much for others that we're on the back burner, and then next thing you know, we don't even know what happened, right? Because we've taken ill. We were expending and expending from this need to feel better about ourselves, and but not just a general sense of feeling better about ourselves, because we like to do that, right? But we still then there's a balance to overextending. And I went through that myself, thinking I'm in the in the way of not wanting to be like the system, because I feel that our system is pretty much checkbox
Yeah.
work, right? We're not present. If you find a physician, a practitioner, a therapist who's present with you, wow, right? That's not the norm anymore. That's not the standard of care. I
Yeah.
can say that because I've been doing this long enough, and it's disheartening to me. And I've been a patient in the system, and I was wow, I was really shocked at what I experienced. Okay. And I know we can do better. And so, but when we feel like we're caught up in the wheels of life, we're in this automated kind of world, right? Where do we kind of interrupt that? And when we have demands on us that have great responsibility, right? Um, if we leave ourselves out, at some point this catches up, and
Mm,
it can catch up on our deathbed, okay?
mm,
And so I've seen it there too. um and so if we can come to a point where we're just like, okay, I want to feel better, I want to do better, but I don't know how. Well, come here and we can begin and learn how, right? Because we're learning as we're going, and it's a choice to grow, right? We're going round in circles, patterns, whatever. But there's a choice where we want to actually grow. And that's where we take wounds, and we take experiences, and we just the perspective that we have of our life lives in our body. And so really coming into this communion and integration of and alignment of the best of who we are, right, is going to correlate to our physiology, because
yeah.
everything plays out as a biochemical cocktail in the system. Hormones, right? Um, Cortisol, right? Adrenaline, oxytocin, right? Dopamine, serotonin, all these things that we take medications for. Guess what? We produce it in the system, right? So if our reliance is only on the external world to make things right, that has limitations.
Yeah.
We have an abundance in our system. We need to learn how to operate, and we are like custodians of this body. We we have our charge is to take charge, but it's like if we just stay charged, like we talking about
Yeah.
emotion, like so we need to discharge, right? Let go. Just like we have an elimination, you take in food, you stimulate it, you use it for what you need to resource your body,
Yeah.
and then elimination. Well, why aren't we eliminating some of these, like, you know,
Yeah.
feelings and emotions that are just not serving us anymore, and they're not even true, a lot of them.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, that's really good. I I'm looking forward to our informational meeting. This will be Friday, February 28th,
Right.
and it's free. We want to invite people to come to it, to really be able to. So, this informational meeting, not like this podcast, which we're recording and then people can listen to. What we want, for the informational meeting, people will be able to attend live, ask you questions about the program, ask you questions about anything they want to, really. And so that's an hour long meeting. It's Friday, February 28th, not February, March
March.
28th. Yep. Thank
Yeah.
you. The 28th of this month. It's 9:30 Pacific time or 12:30 Eastern time. And you can figure out Central would be 11, Mountain would be 10:30. Um, but yeah, free informational meeting. We'll do it on Zoom, and it's to give people a chance to understand, ask all the questions they want about the program, and then sign up for it if they want to, and be able to get help from you. So I think really encouraging people to show up to it. You can find out about the informational meeting by going on Moral Injury Support Network. Um, LinkedIn page, Facebook page, etc. Um, we'll have all the information about it in the show notes of this podcast, so you can get exactly how to attend the meeting, as well as my email address and Deborah's email address, so they can reach out to us directly about it, and then we'll go from there, right?
Yeah. And certainly folks can, if you have other, questions about even the show, I mean, on LinkedIn, you can direct message me. And if you provide, you have a link, I'll be happy to share on mine too. But yeah, it's an informal sort of thing. This
Right.
is eh, the first thing that's so important is that you feel like it's it's okay, and it's time, and that felt sense of safety internally, right? That is the thing that is organic, right? The authenticity of presence. So it is for me to create that, hold that for you. And then on your end, is that palpable, right? Is that on your end, right? What you feel with me and you, Dr. Roberts, present, but as well as within yourself, right? Because you're walking in that body 24/7. You're in that body, right? And so it is that internal awareness and empowerment and just peace, right? So that's what we seek, and that it does play out with how we function, how we relate to others, and just living the life that we want to live, we truly want to live. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm
Great.
excited to, yeah, to answer
Yeah.
any questions. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. So again, anybody out there listening, if you're riding in your car and you're listening, and you can always reach out to me, droberts@misns.org, and I will make sure you get Deborah's information. She gets any questions you have. The informational meeting is March 28th, 12:30 Eastern Time, 9:30 Pacific, and again, like it's on our social media sites, and it's, again, totally free to come to, and we'll just have space in the meeting. You don't really have to register in advance or anything. You can just use the Zoom link that you'll see in the show notes, as well as on our social media sites. log in, and it's open for you there. So, um, Dr. Howell, Deborah, it's been great having you on the show, and having, I think we had some great talk. I think in society, we're beginning to understand a lot more of the body, mental, emotional state connections. And I can say for myself personally, as somebody who's struggled for a long time with the safety of my own emotions and the safety of my own experiences, that, working with a therapist, it was really helpful to kind of reach back to those experiences and, validate them and how I was feeling at the time, and then, sort of reinterpret them, being able to um, speak to my inner child or whatever, the Dan from back then, and like sort of reconnect in a positive way to those experiences, reinterpret them, and be able to move forward. I mean, there's just um so much to be said for that kind of approach. And having talked to senior military leaders, who, many years, like, um, sort of charged through their careers, high speed, um, type A personalities that took charge of their careers, did really well. Many of them at those later years, hit a wall. They hit some real challenges, and they weren't able to just like power through them. They had to, get help from a therapist or a holistic practitioner like yourself, who can help them, with some practices that they can do, and new thinking about, about things, change the way they looked at things, particularly when it comes to military people, about why they viewed emotions, and allowing those emotions, other than like rage, anger, and aggression, that's often served well in the military, but allowing those other kind of emotions to be present, and so on. So I think there's tons of validity, and like you said, this is scientifically backed stuff. And I hope people really, really tune into that meeting, and get a chance to meet you, and um, think about, taking part of the program themselves.
Yes, me too. And thank you so much for having me and having this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Yeah.
Okay, until next time.
Yes.
Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.